Here's how I made this super unique top for this ethereal outfit. I started with a wire base. This is just 12 gauge craft wire from the craft store. I shaped it into like these leaf shapes, and then I attached them together in the middle using strapping tape or filament tape. Once the two pieces were nice and secured together, I trimmed off the excess and then I shaped it to my body, so I just kind of molded it to where I wanted it to sit. Next, I used a thinner wire to wrap around the base that I just built, and this is just to create texture on the wire that helps the clay stick to it. I'm using Cosclay. This is a newer clay on the market, but basically once it's baked, it turns into a flexible plastic. So basically I rolled it out into sheets and then used it to cover the wire frame, and then using my fingers, I just kind of patted it and smoothed it down until it created the perfect smooth cup shape. Okay, so once that was finished, I baked it at 275 for 30 minutes and it became a hard plastic like this. Now that our base shape is nice and secured, I'm going to work on the details. So again, I'm going to be using Cosclay, and I'm just creating these strips that I'm going to mold into like a wavy pattern, and then using my fingers, I'm just blending it down into the hardened clay. And then I'm using this little tool to just smooth it out. I used nail polish remover because that's all I had on hand, but basically if you wet it, it will help smooth it out even more. Once I was happy with the details, I baked it again, and this is the result. Now that that's finished, it's time to start on the bodice pieces. I'm gonna make some little fins to sit on my hips. I'm gonna use the same wire that I used earlier, and then take these pliers to make these corners nice and angled. Using a thinner wire, I'm gonna create these fin details. So I'm just gonna kind of wrap it around and create these little, I don't know, finger things, and kind of bend them to the shape I want, trim them, and then using that really thin wire we used earlier, I'm going to create the spaces in between and just kind of wrap and make these little scoop shapes. And then using that same thin wire, I'm going to create that texture that we did earlier to make the clay stick better. Next, I'm rolling the clay out into nice, really thin pieces, and then I'm just laying it over my wire frame and sculpting it, covering all the wire pieces until it's completely covered. Once all the wire is completely covered and it's all smoothed out, I'm going to go ahead and bake it. While that was cooking, I'm going to start on the frame that those fins are going to attach to. So I created this basically like little belt loop thing on either end of these wires, and then a nice little point in the center. Now that our little fins are baked, I'm going to add the details basically like we did earlier. So I'm creating these little rolled up pieces of clay and then smoothing them out to create the textures on the fins. To attach the fins to my wire frame, I basically had to create little holes inside the fins that I just made, and then taking wire, I basically strung it through the holes and then wrapped it on to my wire frame. So kind of like sewing the fins onto the frame. And I did it nice and tight. I wasn't sure if this was going to hold very well, but it actually held up really great. Once my fins were nice and secured onto my frame, I covered all the metal pieces with clay. And then I rolled out little strips to make these little like wavy details, and I just kind of gently, very carefully made these wavy patterns onto the frame. I used multiple strips to just kind of look like it was kind of weaving in and out of each other. So basically I'm going to do the same exact process for the middle piece minus the fins. For the crown, I'm using this flat wire I found. It's very bendy, so I'm going to shape it into like a V shape and then make little loops at the end to put bobby pins in to stick to my hair. Once the crown base shape is complete, I'm going to take wire and again do our thin wire wrap to make it textured, and then I'm going to just weave it on to the crown base and kind of like this like woven pattern, kind of like a vine going up and down around the crown. Once I got it to where I like it, I trimmed the edges and then added a few more pieces on till it looked like this. Then it was time to cover the wire pieces with the clay. So once all the wire was completely covered, I then took my thin strips and just kind of did this weavy, twisty pattern all throughout the wire frame. You have to be the most delicate with this part because until the clay is baked, it's pretty fragile. So I was just gently kind of twisting, curving, and weaving these pieces in and out. Once it was finished, it looked like this, and then I went ahead and baked it. Once all the pieces are completed and baked, I'm going to start decorating process. So I'm using this filament and Mod Podge to just kind of add this like holographic translucent effect to the clay. I just cut up little random pieces and just kind of placed them where I saw fit. Next, I'm going to start the painting process. I'm using glossy Mod Podge and this holographic powder I got on Amazon. I'm just kind of mixing it and then using that mixture to paint the clay. To create more dimension, I'm also using a pearlescent paint to paint some of the pieces and the edging and the details on the fins. So I just made sure every part of the clay piece was covered in this holographic powder, including the insides and underneath. To add just a little bit more shimmer and sparkle, I'm using these holographic flakes and just dotting it on. Once I got all of the pieces covered in the holographic paint, I waited for it to dry, and then I sealed it with this super high shine Mod Podge spray. Once the gloss was nice, dry, and hardened, it was time to make the attachable straps. I created these straps from strips of felt, and then I just looped it through a jump ring and stitched it closed, and then I used a bunch of E6000 glue to secure the straps to the top. I did 2 strips at the top and then 2 strips on the side for the straps. And then I added these metal straps I made through the jump rings. For the final details, I'm going to use this liquid chrome pen I found on Amazon, and I'm just creating these little details and veins to add accents to the piece. So now that all the pieces are done, I placed them on the mannequin and played around with chains and diamonds to just kind of see where I wanted them all to lay, and then I just attached them with E6000 glue. To create the little detachable shoulder straps, I just created this strip of fabric, and then I sewed it in half, looped it through a ring that I found, and then stitched it closed on the other side, so it looked like this. I added a large jewelry clasp to that ring so that I could take it on and off, and secured it with a jump ring. I trimmed off any leftover pieces, and that is your shoulder straps. So here is the final result. I absolutely love how it turned out, and because this clay is flexible, it doesn't break, it just kind of bends and molds with your body, which makes it perfect and wearable.